minutes after the hour on this Tuesday, a scandal brewing in the WNBA as Las Vegas Aces head coach Becky Hammon doubles down once again, rejecting claims made by a former player, Dearica Hamby, that she was discriminated against and subsequently traded to another team because she was pregnant with her second child.
WNBA player Dearica Hamby is a top performer in the WNBA. And yet, despite that, and despite the fact that she played an important role for the Las Vegas Aces in securing their first WNBA championship in franchise history in the 2022 season, she was traded the following season to the Los Angeles Sparks. This, Hamby says, was a downgrade for a number of reasons. And she also says that this move was made solely out of discrimination against her for getting pregnant in 2022 with her second child, Legend. So now she's filed a lawsuit in federal court alleging pregnancy discrimination and retaliation for making complaints about the pregnancy discrimination. And she's not just suing her former team, the Las Vegas Aces, she's also suing the WNBA as a whole. And so this leads to the question, did the Aces trade her just to get rid of her because she was pregnant, or did they have a legitimate reason for trading her? And when she complained to the WNBA about this alleged pregnancy discrimination, did the WNBA do enough to investigate and take corrective action? And did they also retaliate against her afterwards? I'm an attorney who has actually litigated employment cases to include pregnancy discrimination cases, and not to mention, I am currently well into my third trimester of my own pregnancy, so I have some thoughts about this one. So watch until the end, and then I want to know what you think. Let's get into it. Okay, so first, let's go over what exactly happened here to make sure that everyone is on the same page. To start off, in case you're unfamiliar with the WNBA overall, the season looks more or less like this. The preseason starts in April of every year. The regular season then runs from around mid-May through mid-August. Then the postseason picks up and ends around mid-September. According to Hamby's complaint, the 2022 season was a great one for her and for her team, the Las Vegas Aces. Not only did they perform well in the regular season, but they ended up winning the WNBA Finals in September of that year. On the way there, Hamby says that she was part of the starting 5 players in 32 of 34 regular season games that year. Before that happened, though, somewhere in the middle of this season, she was negotiating with the Aces about her contract, which was set to expire. The Aces wanted to keep her for a couple more years, and Hamby says that they offered her some extra benefits to sweeten the deal. One of these was an offer by the Aces to pay for tuition for a private school for Hamby's daughter, Amaya. Another was to allow Hamby to live in team-provided housing accommodations, which would help her family to help her with childcare costs when she was on the road for games. One thing to note here is that she said that these promises were made outside of the contract for the 2-year extension, so it's unclear whether these were some kind of verbal promises or whether they were put anywhere in writing. It's also unclear whether these offers ultimately ended up as part of essentially a separate agreement perhaps, or if they fell by the wayside after an actual contract was signed. But either way, Hamby says that she signed a 2-year extension on June 28th, 2022. And it does sound like these extra offers were part of what she considered in agreeing to this extension. Not long after that, and again, in the middle of the regular season, Hamby says that she found out she was pregnant with her second child. And before I go any further on this, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have to thank this video sponsor. This video is sponsored by Grammarly. Grammarly is an AI-powered communication assistant that helps you connect with others by being more precise and effective in your communication. It's an app that allows you to modify your writing across platforms to help improve your writing in real time. This includes through browser extensions, desktop editors, and mobile keyboard apps. And the platform caters to all types of writing needs. So if you're doing multiple emails to peers or editing an important project on Google Docs, Grammarly has you covered. For my part, the writing stage of my videos has always been the most important, so I tested Grammarly out while drafting up a script for one of my more recent videos. And as I wrote, the Grammarly extension in my Word document started to make suggestions to improve the overall flow of the script. And this use is really just scratching the surface. It also has generative and brainstorming tools to help you complete a writing task even faster. For example, I tested this function out to rewrite portions of one of my recent scripts. Not only did it improve the script, but it also had AI tools to help me create an outline from my script. And I was also able to use the brainstorming AI tools to help me think of some possible titles for another video I've been working on. Anyway, there's a free version, a premium version, and a business version. And even the free version has a lot of tools that can be super helpful to improve your writing. So if you want to level up your writing with an awesome communication assistant right at your fingertips, be sure to check out the link in the description below. And thanks again to Grammarly for sponsoring this video. Okay, back to Hamby's situation here. Like I said, not long after signing the 2-year extension to play for the Las Vegas Aces, and somewhere in the middle of the regular season, Hamby found out that she was pregnant. Specifically, she says that she found this out about 3 weeks after signing the extension contract on or about July 18th, 2022. Almost 3 weeks after that, on August 6th, 2022, Hamby says that she told the Aces head coach Becky Hammon that she was pregnant, along with other coaching and training staff. 2 days later, Hamby says that her doctor confirmed the pregnancy at her first appointment. She then notified the team's general manager, Natalie Williams. Then, 2 days after the Aces won the WNBA championship on September 20th, 2022, she announced to the fans and the media that she was pregnant at the championship victory parade. It was then that Hamby says that everything changed. For one thing, when her daughter's private school tuition became due that same month, the Aces president, Nikki Fargas, said that they were quote-unquote working on it, but didn't really give a date as to when that tuition would be paid. Then on October 1st, 2022, the general manager told Hamby that she needed to vacate the team-provided housing. Then in November 2022, Hamby says that she followed up with Williams and Fargas about her daughter's tuition, and they said that they were quote-unquote still figuring it out. Now, the complaint doesn't ever clarify whether the Aces actually ended up paying for Hamby's daughter's tuition. If they did, then this is a bit of a weaker part of her claim, even though they seem to have dragged their feet according to the way that this is laid out in the complaint. That said, there's still plenty here that Hamby alleges that looks pretty bad for the Aces in particular. To highlight the point, Hamby talks about a January 15th, 2023 phone call that she had with head coach Hammon. Now, as someone who has litigated employment discrimination cases, I have to say it's my opinion that the comments that Coach Hammon allegedly made during this phone call are inappropriate and legally pose a problem for the Aces here. According to the complaint, she said things like she asked Hamby if the pregnancy was planned, and then when Hamby said that it wasn't planned, Hammon told her that she wasn't taking proper precautions to not get pregnant. She then allegedly wrongly accused Hamby of signing the 2-year extension while knowing she was pregnant, and she apparently implied during the conversation that by accepting the 2-year extension, Hamby was implicitly agreeing not to get pregnant during those 2 years. And so when Hamby responded to this by saying, "So you're trading me because I'm pregnant?" Coach Hammon allegedly responded not by denying that as the reason, but instead by saying, "What do you want me to do?" I will say, this does sound like an implicit admission for things later to come. But in the same phone call, Coach Hammon allegedly also said that Hamby wasn't taking her off-season workout seriously, which Hamby also disputes. And Hamby also alleges that during this conversation, Coach Hammon told Hamby that she was a quote-unquote question mark, and that the Las Vegas Aces quote-unquote needed bodies, and that Hamby wouldn't be ready to play in time for the start of the next season. However, Hamby alleges that she responded to this by saying she'd be giving birth during the off-season and that she anticipated being ready to play by the start of the preseason the following April. So like I said, these comments by Coach Hammon on their own are, in my opinion, discriminatory. I can't think of a single work environment where it would be okay for a supervisor of any kind to be saying these kinds of things. However, one thing that people have to keep in mind here is that according to the complaint, this was all in a single phone call. It's unclear if it was recorded in any way or if there was any sort of secondary reference to the conference that can help to corroborate Hamby's claims that Hammon actually said these things. Otherwise, this could turn into a she said situation. Now, that doesn't mean that these comments can really just be completely disregarded as if they didn't happen, but it does mean that there is going to be a little bit more work that needs to be done by the plaintiff to prove that this is correct if Hammon actually denies saying these things. But if hypothetically speaking, this case were to go to trial and a jury finds that Hamby's allegations about this conversation are persuasive, this is actually an even bigger problem for the Las Vegas Aces because the very next day, Hamby found out that she was being traded to another team. This became official just 5 days later when the Las Vegas Aces announced that she was being traded to the Los Angeles Sparks. Now, in response to this, Hamby apparently posted to her social media on the same day, putting the Aces on blast essentially, and telling the public that she was being punished for getting pregnant during the season. A couple days later, the executive director of the WNBA's Players Association sent an email to the WNBA's general counsel asking to have the WNBA investigate Hamby's allegations. Not long after, the WNBA did just that. This investigation lasted until May 16, 2023, and basically resulted in two things. First, the Las Vegas Aces lost the ability to make a first-round draft pick for the next season. And second, Coach Hammond was suspended for 2 games without pay. In the meantime, Hamby says that she gave birth to her son Legend on March 6, 2023, and then on April 28, 2023, she reported to training camp on time and began preseason play. Then, during the regular season, she says that she played in all 40 games, not missing a single one. So, assuming that the allegations in the complaint are true, that after all of that, despite the accusations that she was not taking training seriously and that she wasn't going to be ready for the next season to start, she was traded to a new team and then she showed up as required. She had about 7 or 8 weeks of postpartum recovery and then got back to work as a professional athlete. I'm not gonna lie, as I look forward to my own postpartum recovery coming up, I think that's incredibly impressive. Although I haven't yet been through it myself, from everything I've learned by researching the topic and talking to other moms at various stages of motherhood, the fact that Hamby was back to playing professional basketball basically 2 months later is incredible and not the norm. I wouldn't say that other moms should be measuring themselves against her on this, but it certainly deserves some applause that she was able to get back so quickly. Okay, so that was the facts of this case. Now let's get into the law here. In employment law, pregnancy discrimination cases are really interesting because they're often a mix between gender discrimination and disability discrimination. When I've seen them, they've often come together with some kind of a request by the plaintiff to her employer for some kind of an accommodation related to the pregnancy, and the employer either responds by making things overly difficult or improperly denies the accommodation or finds some way to try to get rid of the plaintiff after they've asked for that accommodation. So those accommodations are really where we get into disability discrimination. But otherwise, we are mostly in the land of gender discrimination, which is unlawful both under federal law and under state law in Nevada, where this lawsuit was filed. And in this particular case, we are mostly talking about the gender discrimination side of pregnancy discrimination claims. And so this particular case actually has really just 2 types of claims. There's pregnancy discrimination, and then there's pregnancy retaliation. Pregnancy discrimination is where the employer finds out that the plaintiff is pregnant and then treats the plaintiff unfairly simply because of the pregnancy. And because pregnant women are in a protected class, this is considered unlawful discrimination. Pregnancy retaliation is where the plaintiff has made some kind of complaint to the employer or to a governing body, and that complaint has to do with the allegedly unfair treatment that they're getting in relation to the pregnancy. And so this kind of a complaint is considered a protected activity under the law. So Hamby actually makes 3 claims. One is a discrimination claim against the Las Vegas Aces. Another is a retaliation claim against the Las Vegas Aces. And finally, the last one is a retaliation claim against the WNBA as a whole. So what is Hamby saying is discriminatory behavior or retaliatory behavior by these 2 defendants? Let's start with the first claim. Hamby alleges that her trade to the Los Angeles Sparks was motivated by the fact that she announced that she was pregnant after signing the 2-year extension. And she says that she suffered a number of harms as a result. This includes things like lost promotional or endorsement opportunities due to being downgraded to a less competitive team and one that is in a much more saturated market. It also includes being relocated to a more unfavorable tax environment. And this is very true. The tax environment of living and working in Nevada is very different than that of California. Anyway, there's also the lost opportunity to participate in a back-to-back WNBA championship. Now, she also alleges emotional harm, like the fact that she was embarrassed, humiliated, angered, and discouraged by the actions taken against her, and that lasted a while afterwards. Now, this is very common in discrimination cases, and in my experience, adds on a good amount to the financial damages, the compensatory damages here. Basically, you can take whatever she says that she lost in endorsements and had to pay extra in taxes and all of that. That's like the financial part that's just calculating those numbers. And then you can double or triple them for the emotional harm. And so for this claim, as well as the 2 other claims, she's alleging not just compensatory damages, but also punitive damages because she says that they did this with malice. And she's also alleging attorney's fees under some other statutory frameworks as well. And punitive damages can also significantly multiply the damages on top of those was financial and emotional damages as well. Plus the attorney's fees, having all of her attorney's fees paid for by the other side, we are really looking at some pretty significant numbers here. But we have to anticipate what the defense is going to argue in a case like this. And when it comes to any employment discrimination claim, we have to look at any possible legitimate, non-discriminatory reasons why the employer may have taken certain actions against the plaintiff. Because in reality, being a member of a protected class, whether it's for gender, race, religion, disability, what have you, that on its own isn't enough to shield an employee from adverse actions by their employer. Specifically, if the employer has a good reason to demote an employee or fire an employee, that is a valid defense to an employment discrimination claim. For example, if a plaintiff makes a claim for pregnancy discrimination, but it turns out that the plaintiff has been on a performance improvement plan for longer than she's been pregnant, and then she gets fired because there hasn't been any improvement in her overall work quality, it's hard to say that she was fired because of the pregnancy. And so here, what do the Las Vegas Aces say is the reason for Hamby's trade? Well, we don't know their full response to the litigation yet because their deadline to respond to the complaint isn't yet up. But they have made other statements in their own defense since Hamby made those allegations about pregnancy discrimination on social media. For example, Coach Hammond said in May 2024 that the decision to trade her was entirely made so that they could get 3 other players for the amount they were paying Hamby. And very recently, on August 19th, 2024, Coach Hammond also made another statement that didn't deny that she said what Hamby says she said in that January 15th, 2023 phone call, but basically denies that the character of her actions amounted to bullying or discrimination.
Here's some facts. I've been in either the WNBA or the NBA for now 25 years. I've never had an HR complaint, never, not once. I still didn't actually because Dearica didn't file any. She didn't file with the Players Union. She didn't file with the WNBA. Those are facts. It's also factual that nobody made a call about trading her until Atlanta called us in January. That's a fact. Okay? And so, to me, it just didn't happen. I'm sorry, the bullying, I spoke with her every day. If she wanted to practice, she practiced. If she didn't, she didn't. Over the top care, actually. Over the top care.
Now, I do have a couple responses to Coach Hammond's comment. First, the fact that Hamby didn't make an HR complaint or that she didn't complain to the Players Union earlier, that doesn't matter for the substance of her claims. It's not a requirement for a plaintiff to make a complaint to HR for there to be a valid discrimination claim. Making a complaint or not making a complaint does not make any act by a supervisor or an employee more or less discriminatory. And in fact, there could be plenty of reasons why an employee doesn't make an internal complaint, such as workplace culture. An employee could be worried about things getting worse at work if they complain, for example. And if you have a star player like Hamby, she could also be the type of person who generally doesn't complain and just toughs it out for as long as possible. Now, Coach Hammond also says in this statement that the Aces didn't make a call about trading Hamby until they got a phone call from Atlanta in January. But it's unclear as to what specifically she means by make a call about trading. Does that mean that that's just the first time that anyone made a concrete final decision to trade her? Or does that mean that that was the first time anyone in the Aces organization even brought up the possibility of trading her? Because those two things could be very, very different. If there are internal communications, for example, showing that the Aces are already for a long time looking to get rid of Hamby now that she was looking like she was going to be some kind of a pregnant burden for them, as they may have assessed her to be, then that phone call from Atlanta could just be a happy coincidence for them. And then there are the other comments that she made about Hamby getting to practice when she wanted to practice and not practicing when she didn't want to. That can help the defense, of course. But on the other hand, being non-discriminatory in one circumstance also doesn't erase being discriminatory in another circumstance. For example, if what Coach Hammond is saying here is actually correct, but it still also happens to be the case that Coach Hammond says what Hamby said she did in that January 15th, 2023 phone call, Hamby arguably still has a good discrimination case here. Anyway, then Hamby also has 2 claims of pregnancy retaliation, one against the Aces and one against the WNBA. As I said before, retaliation claims are claims where the plaintiff says that they engaged in some kind of protected activity and that the employer retaliated against them in response. The protected activity that Hamby points to is making public claims about pregnancy discrimination, particularly as they relate to her trade to the Sparks. And here's what she says the Aces did in retaliation. First, she says that the Aces told all players and staff basically to shun her. Second, she says that the general manager made a false public statement about Hamby, implying that Hamby and the Aces were aware of her pregnancy in June 2022 as opposed to July 2022. Third, she says that the Aces tried to wrongfully obtain confidential medical records from her after trading her to the Sparks. Fourth, she also says that they refused to extend an invitation to her to join the team for a White House ceremony to meet Vice President Harris to celebrate their first WNBA championship. And finally, she says that they retaliated against her by telling the arena video personnel in September 2023 not to show Hamby's daughter Amaya on screen, despite the fact that she was a fan favorite. Anyway, then we also have the retaliation claims against the WNBA. First, Hamby says that although the WNBA did investigate her claims into the Aces, they didn't properly investigate them as fully as the law requires them to do. She also alleges that the punishments the WNBA handed out to the Aces and to Coach Hammond were essentially slaps on the wrist, and that they took no steps to actually correct or address a violation of Hamby's rights, for example, by disapproving her trade to the Sparks when they had the ability to do so. Then she also alleges that the WNBA then elected not to extend a contract that they had with Hamby to perform marketing work for them under her league marketing contract. She doesn't allege that there was any sort of a breach of this contract, just that after it expired, they didn't extend it. I will say that this last one is a bit of a tougher argument to make, since there can be tons of reasons why they didn't extend that contract. Other factual circumstances like internal conversations about Hamby will definitely help shed some light though. So those are the main allegations. I personally think that the public justifications made by the Aces about Hamby's trade could be good defenses. It's common in every sport for a franchise to want to offload a single heavy contract for several cheaper players if that's what the team needs for that season. However, if what Hamby alleges about Coach Hammond's comments in that January 2023 phone call are accurate, then that casts some serious doubt about the motives for the Aces to trade Hamby to the Sparks. And so I really think that that is one key point in this lawsuit for either side here. Also, I do think the fact that Hamby went right back to work the next season after she was traded to the Sparks without any real kind of delay from recovering from her pregnancy is also a very good point of evidence in favor of Hamby here, because it speaks very well about her overall work performance. But those are my thoughts. What do you think? Do you think this was a legitimate trade, or do you think that this happened because the Aces and maybe Coach Hammond wanted to punish Hamby because they thought that she was hiding a pregnancy from them while negotiating a 2-year extension? Do you think this was just straight up pregnancy discrimination, or was the Aces organization justified in their actions? Let us know in the comments down below. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this, or at least found it interesting or informative. And if you did, I would love it if you could hit the like button. It does help us with the YouTube algorithm gods. And if you're new here and you want to see more coverage of crazy cases and interesting legal topics, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you can find out when the next video is out. And if you're really loving the content and you want to know how to best support the channel and get early access to videos like this one, consider becoming a member of Bike Club. You can join either through YouTube memberships or by becoming a supporter on Patreon, and links to both are in the description below. Otherwise, see you in the next one.